You can't make an omelet without first breaking a few eggs. And you can't build a house without first cutting down a few trees. And I can't think of any building process, regardless of how large a giant construction project or how small just making breakfast. You can't get there without some conflict first. Every progression that we go through in life to change from what we were to what we will be, something has to be broken, something has to die to move on to the next thing. When you're thinking of just the regular cycle of life, I mean, it was the circle of life, I believe, that Simba sang about in The Lion King. But that circle of life includes something dying and the decomposition process to become the soil that has the nutrients to feed the seed that grows to the vegetable that becomes a fruit that is eaten by the animal that then dies, that decomposes. It's the circle of life. It's not real complicated for us to figure out, except that we seem to have got locked in somewhere in one place in life, in one stage in life, where we have this selfish nature, this desire to get and to have our own way. And we see it, sadly, in older and older and older people. It used to be called the terrible twos. My kids went through it. I think everybody's does. Some a little earlier, some a little later, but usually around 2 years old when they realize that they can do some things all on their own. I remember reading about a lady whose child, a little girl, was determined to leave the house with one pink sock and one orange sock and with 2 different shoes on, and her clothes didn't match at all. And mom would fight her and fight her and fight her for hours sometimes to get ready to leave the house. Honey, those don't match. You'll have to go back and try again. Honey, those don't match. You'll have to try again. And finally, the little girl just looked at her and said, why can't I just wear what I want to wear? Now, you got to be honest for a moment and answer that question with integrity. Because really, the only answer to that question is because people are going to laugh at you and I'm going to be ashamed. That's really the only answer mom had. Mom could really only say, because you're going to look silly and I'm going to be embarrassed by it. Now, who's being selfish at that point? The little girl or mom? Don't we all kind of have that same expectation, though, that once we've molded or crafted or raised this child or trained this team or built this company, that everything in it will look and reflect like us, that it will look just like us, that it will behave just like us, that we will impart wisdom and knowledge and habits that will be idyllic? I mean, that's what we want, right? Whether we're training a team or building a football team or a soccer team or a volleyball team or a baseball team or a sales team or a manufacturing team, we want to know that the results are going to be the same every single time. Stephen Covey said in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, always begin with the end in mind. Before you start to develop a process, step 1, step 2, step 3, know what step 57 is going to look like. What will the finished product look like? Stephen Furtick, in a recent message that I saw, had a puzzle box of one of the Star Wars fighter ships. I don't remember which one because I couldn't see the box that well. But next to the box, he had all the tiny pieces of that fighter ship laying on the ground next to the box. And he said, sometimes you look at the picture on the box, and when you open the box, you're surprised to find out that all of these pieces look like something else. And none of them, on their own, look like the ship. Well, I think that's reality in many, many levels. But as parents, as fathers, as leaders, we have to realize that's our job every day, is to find the little pieces and put them together. Now, I don't know if you did model cars when you were a kid or not. I did. And they would come in little plastic sheets stacked inside a box, with the exception of the body of the car. And the little plastic sheet would have several pieces stuck in it. there would be one chrome sheet that had all the chrome pieces, and it might be the grill and the back bumper and the wheels and part of the steering wheel and part of the motor. And they would all be on this one little plastic frame, and you had to very carefully twist them until they popped out of that frame and lay them down so that you could later put them back in the car. And when you were done, you had this nice little plastic square frame that was chrome colored, and it was useless because all of the integral parts of the car had already been removed from it. Sometimes in life we look back at that plastic frame and we think, well, the leftovers seem to be more substantive than what I took out. If you get that plastic chrome piece and it only has the 4 wheels in it, you take out a lot less than you leave behind. You tracking with me yet? See, when we're raising kids, we have to realize we're not raising young people, toddlers, elementary age, middle school, high school. We're not raising them to remain kids all their life. It's not our desire that they would be selfish 2-year-olds and have the 2-year-old attitude and be in their terrible twos when they're 22. It's our job as parents, as leaders, to develop people around us into the place that they look more like the parts of the puzzle than the individual pieces still in the frame. Part of that means cultivating them. Part of that means educating them. Part of that means exposing them to broken eggs and cut down trees. Exposing them to the hard things in life that without which you can't do life. You've got to have the hard stuff to recognize the good stuff. The little pieces stuck in that frame, you've got to twist them and bend them and sometimes cut them to get them out of there. And sometimes even when you cut them out, the little connector pieces are still stuck on and you got barbs and you have to use a small blade or a piece of sandpaper and smooth them off. I think life is very much like that. There are parts of life, there are things in our life, there are parts of our character and our nature that are stuck in this framework of culture and society and the way that the world does things. And we've got to remove ourselves from that. And sometimes extracting ourselves from that is painful. Sometimes smoothing ourselves out after we've been detached from the world, that's painful. Sometimes the hardest part is now we have all these little pieces that have been extracted from the culture of the world and they're all laying on the table and we're looking at them going, I don't know what goes where. And we need an instruction manual. We need the picture on the outside of the box. What is it supposed to look like when we're finished? What is a real man? What is a real woman? Not just what culture tells us or society tells us, but what was it made by the designer to be? If you try to put together a model without the picture on the outside of the box, you're going to have something really weird when you're finished. If you don't have the instruction book, when you start pulling those little plastic frames out of there, every little element that's in that plastic frame is not a part. I do remember one that I put together. I was probably, 10, maybe 12 years old. It was called my Mercury lead sled. It has not survived the years since I was 12. I believe my uncle at one time took it from me and said, I will protect it much better than you, so let me take care of it. But the lead sled was a 57 Mercury. And the only chrome on the lead sled was the tip of the transmission, the breather on the top of the engine, and the 4 wheel caps. Except this one stick that I couldn't figure out what it was there for. It had little points on either end of it. And this was a very intricate model. It was a very expensive model. It was probably the 5th or 6th that I ever tried to put together. But I never could figure out what that stick was. I didn't throw away the box, though, and when my uncle saw it, he said, when you open the hood, the engine keeps moving around. How come the engine keeps moving around? Did you put all the pieces in? And I thought, well, that's a silly question. Of course I put all the pieces in. I mean, you can see them. And he turned the car over and the engine flopped to the other side and he looked at it and he goes, where's your drive shaft? I went, why, what? He said, the drive shaft. It goes from the transmission to the back axle. And I said, oh, what would it look like? He said, a long skinny stick. And I said, really? Would it be chrome? He said, in a hot rod it might be, yeah. And I went back and dug through the box, and sure enough, that one stick that I thought was part of the frame was the drive shaft. It was a missing part. And if you know anything about cars, you might know that without the drive shaft, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't matter how powerful your engine is, or how nice your tires are, or how pretty your car is. Without a drive shaft, there's no way to transfer power through the drivetrain from the engine and transmission to the back wheels. Now, so many cars today are front-wheel drive, so that would not be relevant because they have a transaxle. They don't have an axle besides the transmission until you get to the little CV joints. But without a drive shaft, there's no way to transfer power. When we look at the lives of our young people today, what is the drive shaft of their relationship? How do you transfer power from who they are as 3-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 18-year-olds to being a driving force in this society? There are a lot of young people today who simply can't cope when things don't go their way. They throw temper tantrums. I know, because I see them as grown adults, 25, 26 years old in Starbucks, all but throwing their coffee because they got the wrong size cup. Or they got their cup and, oh, that's nasty, that's not what I ordered. And they don't realize that they just drank out of someone else's cup. And so now the barista has to remake 2 cups of coffee. The caramel macchiato that they just took a drink out of that belonged to Carol and not Karen, and the coffee that they ordered to begin with. But see, they become 2-year-olds in a temper tantrum mode. There's no way to transfer power that way. How do we confer the power of our society, our culture, the driving forces of new families coming up, our government, our education systems? How do we give that to a generation of people who can't grow up enough to realize they got to read the name on the coffee cup, for heaven's sake? How complicated is that? But it seems to expand way beyond that. That attitude of entitlement, that attitude of childishness, that attitude that says, I know what I want and I don't care what anybody else wants. That attitude drives a whole lot of behavior in our culture and society. If you think I'm kidding, just pay attention to the drivers around you sometimes. My son likes to watch on YouTube this guy, I think it's called Moto Nation or whatever. He's a motorcycle rider who drives around with a helmet with a camera on top of his helmet and a microphone inside his helmet. And all he does is record how many times he's cut off in traffic, or how many people turn in front of him, or how many people stop in front of him, or how many people stop at red lights and start reading their newspaper, or run the red light altogether, or drive next to him in traffic with their cell phone in their hand. And so they're weaving in and out of lanes. And he gets it all on record. He gets it all on videotape. He had one lady, I watched a short clip of it. She cut him off in traffic. She bumped into him twice. She sped up beside him to keep him from changing lanes. She slowed down in front of him about 15 feet from the red light. Just obnoxious driving. And finally he pulled up beside her, and she had 2 cell phones in her hands. And she was trying to manage both of those phones and traffic. And I don't think she was being mean to the motorcycle rider necessarily. She was just oblivious to the fact that there was anybody else in the world or on the road or in that lane or near that stoplight besides her. That's a scary reality, but it's the reality of a lot of drivers. They have so many things going on in their head, in their lap, in their car, on the radio, on their phone, in a conversation that they're completely oblivious to anybody else around them. In my book, that's called selfish behavior. And selfish behavior is the behavior of 2-year-olds. Selfish behavior should have left us, if we matured properly, if we were trained properly, should have left us in our teen years. But how many grown-ups do you know who are still selfish, who still want their way? Here's a reality that I believe we should all begin to enforce as parents and grandparents. If the child is old enough to say no and mine, they're also old enough to say thank you and please. Wow, think about that for a minute. How many young people do you hear today say thank you and please? And yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir. To show respect to their elders or their superiors. How many people are raised with that ideology? It's not typecasting. It's not recognizing somebody else because they have the job that you don't have. It's a matter of honoring the effort that they put in to get to that place. It's a matter of honoring someone who's older than you because they've lived a little bit longer than you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with opening the door for somebody else, male or female. I raced a couple of ladies across the parking lot yesterday to make sure that I could open the door for them. I think that's a normal thing. I think young people should be raised that way. But if we don't begin with the end in mind, if we don't ask ourselves, what kind of person do we want to be stopped at the red light next to us? What kind of person do we want to see serving our coffee? What kind of person do we want to serve coffee to? What kind of person do we want to be at the library or at the grocery store, at the mall, next to us as we travel through life? What kind of person is that? What type of person? What kind of habits and character would we want them to have? And begin with the end in mind. Because while you have toddlers in your home, you're creating that person. You're developing that person. And then you have to realize at some point, your influence is over. You've done the best that you could do with what you had. All the experience, all the knowledge, all the social skills, all the reading and the wisdom and the impartation that you could possibly muster has been poured into this young person. And at some point, they're going to push away like a ship from the shore, and they're going to drift off into life. And the only thing you can do is hope and pray that you gave them everything they need to do the job. But you can't live it for them. Now, the one thing I like about that illustration is when that ship pushes away from shore, when that little boat goes off into the lake or the ocean on its own, the shore doesn't move. That lighthouse, it's in the same place. It's not just in the same place for today. That lighthouse is a firm foundation. It's standing on the rock. You've probably heard preachers talk about it or other speakers talk about the conversation that took place. And the one said, I see your light. We are on a collision course and you need to change course. And the other person came back and said, I see your light as well and you need to change course. And then commander comes back and the commander says, we are the commander of the USS naval ship XYZ and we are a battleship destroyer. You need to change course. And the other voice comes back and says, well, we are a lighthouse and we can't move. We are on a big rock and you should change course. We've got to realize sometimes that that firm foundation is us. As mom and dad, as leaders of the company, as leaders of the team or the organization, the best hope they have is knowing that when they get out there lost at sea, when the waves are overwhelming them, when the darkness has come and there's not a star in the sky, we are the guiding light that brings them home. We've got to be steadfast. We've got to be firm on what we believe, on what we say, on what we do, that we are the evidence that there is hope, that there's something to return to, that there is a solid ground to stand on. Life will always not be tossed by waves. There is a place to park the boat and relax for a minute. Now, how do I know all that to be evidentially true? Well, part of it I've seen in my own life. But I also read it right here in Scripture. I read that Jesus, when he spent his time with his disciples, he sent them out to do their work. They impacted the world all that they could together. He spent 3 years with them, walking and talking and teaching, mentoring them, challenging them about the things of life, answering questions of life that they couldn't answer on their own. And when that journey was finished, when it was time for him to go on, to go back to heaven where he came from, he turned to his boss, to God the Father in heaven, that solid rock, that firm foundation, that unmovable, unchangeable, unquestionable, never failing Father of ours. And Jesus said, look, I did the best I could with what I had. You gave me all of you, and I gave all of that to them. You gave me what they needed to hear and to know and to see, and I gave them exactly the message that you gave me. You told me how they should live, and I told them how they should live. You told me what they should believe, and I told them what to believe. You demonstrated for me grace and love, and I demonstrated grace and love in them. And I've done the best I can. But I also know that I'm leaving them now, like graduation day. I'm leaving them now. like their wedding day. I'm leaving them now, like when they go off to the military or off to college. I'm leaving them now. And I'm not praying that you take them out of this world, that everything would be easy peasy for them. I'm praying instead that while they're in this world pursuing this life, that you would keep them, that you would put your hands around them, that you would look out for them, that you would provide for them, that you would be there for them, that you would be the solid rock for them. Have we as parents and leaders done the same thing? Have we given them everything they need to know? Have we imparted to them the wisdom? Have we raised grown-ups, adults, people that we would like to see in society, managing stores and owning stores and running companies, people with the character, with the knowledge, with the wisdom, with the heart of a good leader? Is that who we've trained to be around us? Or have we trained more 2-year-olds? More 22-year-olds and 32-year-olds and 42-year-olds who still act like 2-year-olds? Because if that's what we've trained, we didn't begin with the end in mind. We may have cut some corners or taken it easy or not imparted everything we needed to. We may have refused to break some eggs to make an omelet or cut down some trees to make a house. There's going to be some conflict. None of those little parts come out of those puzzle boxes easily and without twisting them, without friction, without a little disjointedness. And maybe some sanding of the rough edges and carving with a blade of the big barbs. But once all those pieces are separated from the frame and each of them have been laid aside, and the model box, the picture, the image that we want to see in our young people as grown-ups, as parents, as adults, as leaders. When we see that picture and we see where every piece fits, it's still going to take a minute to put them all in there. I know of people who built ships in a bottle. Pastor Brad Stahl has been working on one, building the ship inside the bottle. I would go nuts. I don't have the patience for that. But that's much like raising children too. You have a very confined space and a whole lot of detail that goes inside there. You got to work with a magnifying glass and look really close at what you're doing. What a picture of parenting or leading or teaching. The patience necessary to assemble all those little pieces in such a confined space. It's called raising a toddler. No one said it would be easy work, but it's definitely worthwhile work. But can you imagine doing that without a picture? Without an image of what it was supposed to be when you're done? That could be a nightmare, not a dream. He says, I spelled out your character in detail to the men and the women you gave me. They were yours in the first place, and then you gave them to me to raise. Kind of like the birth of the child. The mother has to do that. The father should be a part of that. The mother and the father together should raise the child. But at some point we realize we've got to give him back to God. He loved them first. He will love them last. He will love them longer. He will love them better than we ever know how. That's exactly what Jesus said. I spelled out your character in detail to the men and the women that you gave me. They were yours in the first place. Then you gave them to me. And they have now done what you said. They know now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that everything you gave me is firsthand from you. For the message you gave me, I gave them. And they took it. And they were convinced that I came from you. They believed that you sent me. I pray for them. I'm not praying for the God-rejecting world, but for those that you gave me. For they are yours by right. Everything mine is yours and yours mine. My life is on display in them. I am no longer going to be visible in the world, but they'll continue in the world. While I return to you, Holy Father, guard them as they pursue this life that you conferred as a gift through me, so they can be one heart and one mind, as we are one heart and one mind. As long as I was with them, I guarded them. I protected them in the pursuit of the life that you gave through me. I even posted a night watch, and not one of them got away. Well, except for the rebel bent on destruction, the exception that proved the rule of Scripture. Even the best parents, even the most attentive parents, even the ones with the magnifying glass on every small detail of that ship they're building inside the bottle, will have a rebel. We'll have one child or several children who want to do their own thing, who want to exhibit their own independence, who want to live life by their own standards, their own terms, their own way. As Frank Sinatra said, I did it my way. As Dr. Phil might have said, how'd that work out for you? I think there's a balance. I think if we start early enough, we can raise young adults who become great parents and great leaders and great government leaders and world changers. From day one, we've got to be diligent. From day one, we've got to begin with the end in mind. From day one, we've got to have the patience and the consistency. And we also have to realize that somewhere along the way, we're going to have to admit we didn't get all the pieces right. We didn't get them all in the right place, or we forgot one. We've got to go back and diligently put the pieces in place that we left out. And sometimes we realize, I'm doing this without a picture. I'm doing this without instructions. I'm doing this with no role model in front of me. I've never been a mom. I don't know how to mom. I've never been a dad. I don't know how to dad. I don't have a father figure or a mother figure or an example or a mentor in front of me to look at the box and go, yeah, I'm making one of those. It's time to figure it out. There's too much at stake to lollygag our way through this. We can't make them into the image of God if we're not in the image of God. We can't give them the character details that He gave us if we don't know what those are. How can we raise adults if we're still childish ourselves? Get into the meat of the Word. Grow up in the Scripture. Grow up in your spiritual maturity. Study to show yourself approved, a workman that doesn't need rebuked, but who has studied every principle and precept in Scripture. There are a lot of great books out there. In fact, in January, I'm going to begin a study with my two boys, and we're going to study through Maximized Manhood. Then we will probably go on and do all 9 books and workbooks and essays to become commissioned men of the gospel. Christian Men Network offers a very affordable course and process and training opportunity, and we're going to take advantage of that. I don't have a picture of a complete father in front of me. I don't have a picture of a complete man in front of me. I've got bits and pieces from a lot of places and a lot of my own research. But I believe this pathway is going to give us some pretty good, solid stuff to work through. And if you're local here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you'd like to be a part of that journey with us, send me a private message. We'll do what we can to include you, whether it's by Skype or by phone or scheduling the meeting in such a time that you can participate. We are here, all of us on this planet, to leave a mark. To leave the mark of Jesus Christ, to let the world know He was here, He was real, and He's coming back. And my job is to do all I can, to help prepare you for that. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.